Hey, Daddy, this is the man of the champions, Bill Fonzie Alfonso, giving a shout out to something else. Something else, Daddy.
This is Nicole Matata, Great Warrior Wolf, and you are listening to Something Else.
I'm Tony Cini, and you're listening to Something Else.
Hey everybody, it's Rich Palladino, the voice of New England, and you are listening to Something Else with Aria.
And welcome to episode number 180 of Something Else. Feast your hair holes on this week's episode as we take a look at NWA Total Nonstop Action from April 2nd, 2003. My name is Aria, and joining me, as always, is the D'Lo Brown to my main event Glenn Gilberti. It's Cindy. Cindy, how the hell are you today?
I'm doing well. I mean, it is sunny outside in Tacoma for the next 3 minutes. Then it'll turn to rain, but it'll be sunny again 2 hours from now.
I thought you were doing well because I didn't call you Disco Inferno.
Yeah, I've kind of just ignored the intros.
Wow. All right. So episode number 39 out of 112. There we still have 73 of these to go. 73 more. And then we will never have to utter the letters TNA ever again.
I will say that we might have to double dip with Impact because there is pay-per-view stuff that we will miss if we don't.
Please don't ruin my good time just yet. We have 73 of these episodes to go, and we're gonna then celebrate like there's no tomorrow. By the time Jeff Jarrett wrestles Jeff Hardy on September 8th, 2004, which we'll talk about on September 8th, 2026, I will be throwing the biggest party of all time on this podcast on episode 322 or whatever the hell it's going to be at that point. Count down the episodes, ladies and gentlemen. But so yeah, we're at episode number 39, April 2nd, 2003 from Nashville, Tennessee. It is 3 days after WrestleMania 19. And one of these shows, TNA 39 or WrestleMania 19, are remembered as one of the better shows of all time. It is not the show that Cindy and I are going to talk about. In fact, I would say it's safe to say that we watched the wrong show this week. Even though this is the TNA show, we would have had much more fun watching WrestleMania 19, I believe.
Meh? It's touch and go for me.
Not a fan of Brock versus Kurt, Austin versus Rock, Shawn versus Jericho.
No, because I saw that WrestleMania live and I didn't care too much for
it. Is it because Lance got bumped to the pre-show, Lance Storm?
No, it was around that time where I watched, but not really.
Back in the day when we found out that Booker T and his kind of people don't win world titles like Triple H so eloquently claimed.
I never seen those promos because I just like after 2000 and like mid 2002, I just kind of stopped watching wrestling. Like
no, right. And I think this is what you're missing. This TNA show. Think about this. You could have been sitting at home over in Washington. in April 2003 going, man, oh man, I am tired of that WWE garbage. Let me let me try this TNA, this total non-stop action. This is professional wrestling the way it used to be and the way you like it, right?
Comcast never carried TNA here in Washington.
Yeah. Somebody on Reddit posted a thread. I didn't see what day it was. I didn't even click on the thread, but it was basically did when TNA began, did it have the same hype that AEW did? And the short answer to that is no. As we discussed last year during the first few episodes, this show was not available everywhere. Um,
No, not even
the
close.
yeah, it's like, and even the cable companies that it was available, like I can tell you, I remember in the cable guide seeing a advertisement for NWA Total Nonstop Action, but it didn't explain what it was. So they really weren't doing a very good job at, that whole promoting thing. But anywho, before we rip our hair out about this week's show, let's tell you what else is happening in the world of wrestling. Well, not so much the world of wrestling, but the world of TNA, thanks to Dave Meltzer at the time and his Wrestling Observer newsletter. And the big news concerning TNA this week is that Sable returned to the WWE. Now, you might be asking yourself, how is that TNA news? That's because Sable had agreed to come in and work with TNA for at least a couple dates in May. And well, WWE came calling, and I guarantee they offered her more money, and she went there instead.
Yeah, they offered her
Uh,
$200 instead of $100.
that's $100 more.
Yep.
Um, we haven't had any updates on the Vince Russo Jarrett power struggle as much, because of course Jerry Jarrett's book ended in 2002. But we got an update here. Vince Russo's gang of people have gone to Dixie Carter to say that Russo should be able to write the shows, get them through unedited, and he should be the writer of the show. Jerry Jarrett has thrown in the towel and is basically doesn't give a fuck anymore. And the only editing he does of the show is he edits out anytime Jeff looks weak. And it's pretty obvious watching these shows that Vince Russo is writing the whole fucking show.
Mm-hmm.
And uh,
I will say
let's
this.
mhm.
I had a deeper thought about a question that you asked last week. What Reign of Terror was worse, Triple H or Jeff Jarrett's? And I think Jeff's is worse. Because at least Triple H will allow himself to be humiliated.
I don't know. You hear enough stories about Triple H around this time, or you remember that time when who was he getting beaten up by? I think he was getting beaten up by Carlito, Cade, and Murdoch on Raw. Outran London and Kendrick to help him and make the save, and Triple H proceeded to beat up all five men by himself. That's
That
one
was
I always.
2006.
That's still. You don't think he was any better in 2003, or like the story when I think I forget it was this show or one of the Trey shows I told the story on last week, but it's like the story about how a writer came up to him to tell him, the plan for that night was for him to be laid out by whomever he was feuding with. Hunter asks, "What page of the script is that on?" And then he goes to that page and rips it out and says it's now not part of the script anymore.
That was two
It's like,
weeks ago when I had mandatory overtime. So I
yeah,
remember you mentioned that
like
on this show.
it's like Triple H as, buried enough people over the years, and fine, he's Mr. NXT, he's Mr., WWE booking now, and everyone loves it. But the second, if he could still wrestle, he would find a way to put himself in the main event of WrestleMania this year.
And
And
win
if you
it.
think if you think I'm lying, remember 2016 when like Cena was injured, Orton was injured, and a few other people injured. I think Rollins was injured. And did they go with somebody new, young, and exciting in that top heel spot to wrestle Roman in the main event? Nope, they went with Triple H. And, you know, whatever.
I will add.
Um,
Here's the thing about that pay per view: if they put anybody else to wrestle Roman in that match, that pay per view would still be one of the worst WrestleManias of all time.
I mean, no doubt, but I mean, I made this comparison at the time, and I'll make it now again. In 1992, when Hogan was gone and Savage was getting to be quote unquote too old, and Flair was this, and yada yada yada, Vince didn't decide to go with Pedro Morales as the WWF champion. You know, and I bet Pedro probably could have gone in and had a 6 month reign with the title. No, he went with somebody new. He took a shot. He took a risk, and it may not have paid off in huge dividends immediately, but I would say Bret Hart did a lot more for the company over the next 5 years than, for instance, Pedro Morales would have. And okay, Pedro might be a bad example. Bob Backlund, because legitimately they tell the story about how Bret told the story about how there were 5 names considered for the WWF title, and it was him, Rick Martel, Tito Santana, and Bob Backlund were 4 of them. And I forget who the 5th one was, but these were the 4 of the 5 people that were seriously considered for the title when he was going to take it off Flair in '92. And that's how they ended up going with Bret. So it's like he
Perfect,
could have gone with
maybe.
Bob Backlund. What was that?
Probably perfect since he was coming
I
back from injury around this time.
I I don't think it was perfect. It was 5 people who had never really gotten a main event push. Um, but I guess Backlund did, but I mean, it hasn't got a main event push in over a decade. But it's like if this was 2016, they would have gone with Backlund because Backlund had the history of drawing before. Whether or not that had anything to do with drawing in 1992 or not. But anyway, let's dive into the show because I could complain about Triple H for 3 hours. So the show begins with main event Glenn Gilberti standing in the middle of the ring for his first appearance on the show. He is telling D'Lo Brown that tonight is the biggest night of his career and calls D'Lo to the ring. D'Lo doesn't want to come out, so Glenn Gilberti calls out Jeff Jarrett. Actually, I'm sorry, he doesn't call it Jeff Jarrett. He calls Jeff Jarrett paranoid and nervous. He says Jarrett is not a good guy, and the only reason why he is a good guy is because he's wrestling in Nashville. AJ Styles flies in out of nowhere and attacks Glenn. AJ is still pissed at Glenn costing him the title match with Raven 2 weeks ago. AJ goes diving into the second row where Glenn is, and Glenn had a chair which he slammed into the head of Styles. Glenn beats AJ over the ringside area, back into the ring. Raven walks to the ring and sits down in the corner as AJ begins his comeback. AJ getting offense is finally what makes security run in, which also makes perfect sense. As AJ is being dragged away, Raven confronts Glenn with a chair. D'Lo runs out to get in Raven's face, which leads to Sex running in and separating D'Lo and Raven. And just as a reminder, tonight, D'Lo Brown is going to wrestle Jeff Jarrett for the World's Heavyweight Championship.
I want to add a line that Disco or Glenn Gilbert. I have in my notes Disco still.
I have to go in at after I watch every show and do a find and replace for Glenn with 1 N and replace it with Glenn with 2 N's.
There's only one Glenn with 2 N's that I recognize, and that's Glenn Close.
Mm-hmm.
So
what was your note on this?
Okay.
Fine.
He mentioned in the promo that reverb. He mentioned in the promo that Jarrett stabbed D'Lo in the back by nailing him with a chair, giving him a concussion and 12 stitches. You're going to see those stitches in a promo package later in the show. But I do like the analogy that he uses. He says he's Anakin Skywalker getting ready to turn into Darth Vader. Just wait 6 months.
Who are we talking about is turning Darth Vader? Disco Inferno?
Jarrett.
Who?
Jeff Jarrett.
Oh. Ah. So earlier today, Mike Tenay spoke with both Conan and Jerry Lynn. Conan goes on and 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 on that this is Lucha Libre, not the Cruiserweight division or the X division. Lynn pointed out that both him and X-Pac were fans of Lucha. Conan wondered why he had to fly in Mexican wrestlers. Jerry Lynn did not bother to point out what the hell does that have to do with him. He does not book the fucking talent. Why is Conan feuding with Jerry Lynn over whether or not the Mexican wrestlers are being booked on the show? Conan then revealed that he was behind Shark Boy, a mystery man, attacking Lynn last week and gave Lynn the gear from last week. Tenay and Conan both wished Jerry Lynn best of luck in his X Division title match later tonight because, yes, after 7 weeks of being the number one contender, Jeremy Lynn is going to get his shot at the X Division title tonight.
Wait a minute, Linsanity is going to run wild in TNA 9 years before it starts?
Exactly. You know?
Wouldn't he be like 9 or something?
I think he'd be older than that because, you have to at least be out of high school 1 year to be in the NBA. So, the basketball Jeremy Lin had to be at least be 19. Anyway, it's a Vince Russo show, so you know how this one's going to go. But what'd you think about this fine promo segment here with Jerry Lynn and Conan?
That sums it up.
Not good, huh?
Yeah.
By the way, we have an update. Jeremy Lin was 23 years old when he had his breakout moment in the NBA, which, by the way, was 2011, 2012.
So he was 15 in 2003.
Exactly. Actually, at this point, he was still 14 because his birthday is in August.
Even better.
I'm either a Jeremy Lin stalker or I just Googled that shit. Or both.
I didn't know you were a fan of bad basketball players back then. Anyway, after this mind-numbing interview, Goldie is up at Raven's Perch. He gives another cryptic promo, and this becomes it goes off the rails. Some fans really start heckling him, and Raven just switches gears from the somber cryptic promo, and he gives a big old school wrestling shouty promo instead.
Yes,
I just found it weird.
Welcome to live TV, ladies and gentlemen.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, Raven said that he knew his destiny since childhood was to be the NWA champion, which explains why he wrestled in the WWF, WCW, and ECW. All places that you could become NWA champion in, obviously. He also said he doesn't give a damn if he becomes NWA champion in front of these people, which I guess is good since he didn't win the title in front of these people. He won it in front of the people in Orlando.
Right. He did have a shot at the NWA title because he was in WCW around the time they still had it. Like, he was still around during Super Brawl 3.
He did wrestle Chono during one of Chono's week-long stints in the fall of 1992. But, yeah, that's, better left forgotten. So it took 20 minutes, but we finally got our first match, 20 minutes and 3 segments into the show. Brian Lawler with David Flair with NWA World Title replica versus Wildcat Chris Harris. The NWA World Title replica belt has more star presence than Lawler and Flair put together. James Storm apparently has no problem with Chris Harris taking singles matches, and I should point out that only one member of America's Most Wanted would go on to win a world title, but both members of Beer Money would.
I wonder why.
Well, I mean, we're going to get to the Chris Harris main event push in like a year. We'll see how it holds up because I remember 2004. I was ready for Chris Harris to win the world title, and honestly, he kind of had a Lex Luger moment in some ways. He didn't win the title, and his momentum was dead after that. So Harris almost won with a Braden Walker crossbody block, but Lawler kicked out and then got the heat on Harris as Flair tripped him from the outside. Lawler threw a bottle of water, which completely soaked the headsets. That's great. So now the announcers are too busy trying to replace their headsets to worry about the match. The finish saw Harris get a number of 2 counts because of David Flair misdirection spots. Harris does a catatonic on the NWA title belt, but the ref was distracted, so Lawler pinned Harris with a belt shot to the head. This is one of those matches that would have been all right around the 8:45, 8:50 mark, but as the opening match on the show, it's just too much crap for the opener.
Yep.
Brian Lawler wins 3.0 out of 10.
I gave it a 4 out of 10. I was catatonic myself watching this, mainly because this match really isn't that exciting. And I'm just kind of done with David Flair being on my TV at all.
He sticks around for a while. So
yeah, but he isn't
after the
wrestling
match,
anymore. He's done. Well, he'll wrestle on Explosion, but we won't see him anymore.
oh darn. I don't know how I can possibly live with that.
Well, is there a bottle of champagne right next to you?
Yes, there is.
Pop it.
So after the match, Flair and Lawler double team Harris. I kept waiting for Storm to come out, and it's been 20 years, and I'm still waiting for Storm to come out. Instead, Dusty Rhodes came out slowly and beat up both men. To be fair, he stood there while Flair and Lawler ran near his elbow. Now, Dusty got on the mic afterwards and starts telling a story about a 16-year-old kid in Los Angeles. And I actually thought at first he was talking about Cody because at some point he sends Cody and his sister to LA to become actors. But I don't think that's who he was talking about here. But either way, he's in the middle of talking about this kid and suddenly changes the story and starts talking about Babe Ruth. And then I got distracted because some guy called Lawler a faggot, which was picked up by the camera.
Yeah, I heard that too.
Yes. Dusty told the fans that they were now in his posse, which he is using to get his title back, which says something because it's not his title. Lawler called him fat and old, so Dusty wanted a gimmick match with Lawler. Lawler said no. Dusty pointed out that the segment was going too long, so Bryan challenged Dusty to a ladder match next week. Bryan said the same thing I was thinking, that I would pay a shit ton of money to see Dusty Rhodes in a ladder match. The challenge was accepted, and next week, Dusty Rhodes, yes, that Dusty Rhodes, is going to wrestle Brian Lawler in a ladder match.
I am just going to say this right now. We're taping 2 shows at this time because Aria is heading off to Dynasty, so we normally record on Saturday or Sunday. We've seen this ladder match. It's the most unintentionally hilarious ladder match I've seen in quite some time.
I think, Jeff Hardy needs to be worried that, his gimmick of being the spot monkey in a ladder match is coming to an end here. Because, Dusty Rhodes, spoiler alert, Dusty Rhodes climbs to the top of a ladder and does an elbow drop off of the top of a ladder onto Brian Lawler.
No lies detected.
For more details on this, tune in next week as we discuss Dusty Rhodes in a ladder match. So to the back, where Perry Saturn and the Sandman say they have a third partner for a 6-man tag. Jim Mitchell walks in and offers them a member of the new church. Sandman was like, no, we got a partner, but thank you anyway. And this pissed off Jim Mitchell because, of course, it did. We then get Alexis Lurie, who formerly is known in this company as Shut Up Bitch, versus Trinity. Do you remember like a decade or so ago when Madison Rayne dyed her hair brown in TNA and she looked exactly like Mickie James's younger sister?
Yeah.
She did. Well, she looked a lot more like young Mickie James than young Mickie James does.
Pre-boob job. So, yeah.
Yes. Anyway, I went back and looked, and because I actually thought this was the first, because I forgot all of the riveting Trinity versus Desire matches. But this is the third actual women's one-on-one match that we've had in TNA. And no, I'm not counting any of the Miss TNA stuff as women's wrestling. So I assume Trinity is supposed to be the babyface, even though she's aligned with Kid Cash, who is a heel. Remember that story in Jericho's book where Hardbody Harrison and Alex Wright got into a backstage argument at WCW because both wanted to be the heel in their upcoming match? Well, Vince Russo would have just walked up to them and told them both that they were the heel. So Trinity misses a moonsault, and Raven walks to the ring and sits down and watches the match. Raven's appearance led to Kid Cash walking out for some reason. Trinity then won a very long match with a standing shooting star press. After the match, Raven drops Trinity with an even flow DDT, grabs Alexis, and drags her off with her. This is now the third straight week and the first time on this show where a man has beaten the shit out of a woman. To be fair, if we count all those times that Trinity got involved in matches, it's probably more than 3 weeks in a row, but those apparently don't count. This one does. Kid Cash had the chance to make a save, but he turned around and walked away. Now, obviously, Alexis ends up being really good in the ring. It's important to remember that 2010 Mickie James is not 2003 Alexis Lurie, or the other way around. Trinity wins, and despite, ripping on it, I still gave it a 2.0 out of 10.
As far as early 2000s women's wrestling goes, it wasn't bad at all. I thought it was fine. It was clunky. I think both of us can agree on that. It was clunky. But at least genuine effort was made. At least more effort was made than Jasmine St. Clair versus Francine.
Yeah, come on, that was a 5-star match.
No. Minus 5 stars, maybe, but not 5 stars. Anyway. I have to make note of something. Something that kind of pisses me off in wrestling is when an audience group gets over. And I'm not talking about like Hack Guy or Faith No More Guy or Sign Guy at ECW. Because at least they elevated the product a bit. Like the signs were creative and they really got into the show and helped elevate it a bit. Vladimir along those lines. Why is Kid Cash wearing a heel section t-shirt?
Didn't even notice or care.
My eyes roll with that. So 4 out of 10, by the way, with the match.
It's to pander to the lowest common denominator.
Backstage, Goldie asks Jeff Jarrett that he's been acting differently. Jarrett asks him to name names, but Jarrett then insinuates that Goldie's trying to be one of the boys and chokes her. That is moment number 2. And worst of all, it's by your world champion who's supposed to be a face. What the fuck?
Yes, so Goldilocks said some of the boys were saying Jeff Jarrett was acting like a douche. Jeff Jarrett responded to these claims by acting like a douche. and then grabbed the woman ring announcer around the throat and began choking her and threatening to kick her ass before leaving. And again, Jeff Jarrett is the top babyface in the promotion, and Goldilocks is the backstage announcer. Then we get a six-man tag. Christopher Daniels, Ron Harris, and Don Harris versus the Sandman, Perry Saturn, and what I thought was our random surprise of the week, New Jack. Yes, that New Jack. Well, Sandman and Saturn did in fact go out and get a fucking nut job. No offense to New Jack, I did not say that. My brother did. Brian Whitner of Jersey Shore, Pennsylvania, has a blonde spot. He said it. If there is such thing as ghosts, that's who to go after, New Jack. So TNA, in addition to having a shitty remake of Enter Sandman, also has a shitty version of New Jack's theme song. And thankfully, they did not just play New Jack's shitty TNA theme song the entire match. I would have revolted and fast forwarded 10 minutes if that would have happened.
Yeah.
So this six-man tag match where two of the participants are New Jack and the Sandman starts with about 2 minutes of professional wrestling. So after about 2 minutes, Ron, Don, Jack, and Sandman hated it, and we break down into a six-way brawl. They fight all over the place. There's random tables that just happen to be set up under a balcony. At one point, let me see here. Brian Lee ran over and shoved New Jack off the balcony and through the table. Lee also beat up Ron Harris to show he's not with SEX. Slash ran in and got his ass kicked. So Saturn pinned Don Harris with a Death Valley driver. Either I have really mellowed in the last 20 minutes, or this has been the best match on the show so far. 4 out of 10.
I gave it a 5 out of 10, mainly because I'm a big fan of Perry Saturn.
Well,
oddly enough, these were the two best wrestlers did the wrestling in this match by a country mile, which is Daniels and Saturn.
To be fair, like I don't even know who the hell's in third place, but it's a big fucking drop.
The referee.
Mind you, it's 2003, so there's a big drop between Christopher Daniels and Perry Saturn, but we need to dig deep into the Earth's atmosphere to find who is the third best wrestler in this match.
Ron Harris.
It is very much possible that it's one of the Harrises.
Yeah.
So, in case this match wasn't random enough and New Jack's appearance isn't random enough, we get this week's true random cameo, Bart Gunn. Yes, Bart Gunn. The smoking gun who is not daddy ass. So Bart beat up Saturn and then left to go back into the SEX locker room. Bart Gunn.
Makes me wonder, couldn't we get another member of the Natural Born Thrillers that isn't under WCW contract? Like, where the hell is Reno? Or Sean Stasiak?
Wasn't Reno here once already? I don't remember.
I'll look it up.
Sean Stasiak actually, I don't know if he's doing this right now, but he actually goes to chiropractor school. And, one of the few people who realize that, this pro wrestling thing ain't going to last forever. So they should probably take care of life after wrestling.
So I looked it up. According to Cage Match, he had one match in 2002 that we know of, which is on the WWA The Revolution pay-per-view. And in 2003, he worked for WXW, which is Alpha's. I think WXW is Alpha's territory.
I was gonna say, is it the Northeast Pennsylvania WXW or the Germany WXW?
Pennsylvania.
So
that's
I was gonna
Alpha's.
say one of those make more sense than the other. Yes.
Yeah. And he wrestles one match in October, so he is done with wrestling, more likely than not. So, and Sean Stasiak probably in chiropractic school, as you said.
So we're not waiting for a Reno return here in 2025, is what you're saying. He's not going to be on Dynamite next week. I mean, they're announcing the brackets for the Owen Hart Cup on the Dynamite that airs tonight. So there's a very good chance they have a wild card entrant. And who knows, that wild card entrant could be Reno. Because, yeah. Anyway, to the back, where Goldilocks has gotten over her choking. Apparently, she got over it quicker than Jack Perry did. Goldilocks interviewed Kid Cash about why the hell he didn't help Trinity. Cash told Goldie that he told Trinity to stay the fuck out of the ring and that he is the champion. And then before we go back to the front, we can hear Chris Harris yelling at James Storm.
I had it written down, asked if you heard the conversation took place after the interview. Because when I was watching it last night, I thought it was some production fuck up, but then Tanae and Wes said, "Did you hear Chris Harris and James Storm talking?" So,
nope, it is legitimate. They are really pushing towards that that breakup with AMW that is thankfully not going to happen for a little while.
Yep.
Sonny Siaki with Desire versus David Young.
Good Lord, again.
Last week, Siaki made David Young his bitch, but Athena got laid out again. And since David Young is her best friend, news we just discovered last week, we get this rematch. And because Siaki beat the crap out of David Young last week, Desire is handcuffed to the ring. Why isn't Siaki handcuffed to the ring so Young could wrestle Desire? That would make too much sense with what happened. So the most exciting thing to happen in this match was Siaki tried to pin Young with a spine buster, and Young tried to pin Siaki with the Siakalypse. Siaki went for a La Magistral Cradle, but Young blocked it and pinned Siaki. I wrote, when does David Young's famous losing streak start? Anyway, there was nothing wrong with this match. It was certainly a mid-card wrestling match. And I gave it a 5.0 out of 10.
I thought it was a bland, boring match, and I hate it when for multiple weeks in a row we get the same type of crap from the two same wrestlers. 2 out of 10. After the match, though, David Young clips Siaki's knee because he's a bad winner. Athena comes out. They handcuff Siaki. They get the keys from Rudy Charles for Desire's handcuffs. And then in the third moment of violence against women, which didn't absolutely need to happen, David Young gives Desire a spine buster for revenge. This would have been better done if Athena did the spine buster on Desire.
No, we can't have that. We then get a video package of Ron Killings and Mabel. And that leads us to our next match. Ron Killings without Mabel versus Elix Skipper without Triple X. So is Ron Killings a heel or a babyface? Why do I have to ask this in almost every segment?
Because reasons.
So Skipper almost forgot to kick out 12 seconds into the match and almost did the most epic job this side of Daniel Bryan and Sheamus. I mean, I guess Dusty, Flair, and Lawler did go long, so we need to cut some time out of other stuff here. Killings did a beautiful dive over the top rope onto Skipper. He
Yeah.
dove right over with such ease. You believe he could have gone much higher. Now, of
Yeah.
course, he also was in an alliance with Mabel, so I mean, he's obviously the second most agile member of his team. So Skipper learned something from his old partner by breaking out the Canadian Maple Leaf. Unfortunately, Lance Storm didn't teach him everything, as Killings made it to the ropes. Skipper also hit a really nice missile dropkick for a 2 count. Chris Daniels ran down for immoral support, but Killings won with a sit-out front suplex from the middle rope. After the match, Daniels was on the attack, but Mabel walked in, as opposed to ran in, and beat up both Daniels and Skipper. How much do you think Mabel made for the 30 to 45 seconds of TV time he had on this week's show? With that,
$1,000.
well, with that said, I really liked this match, and I also believe, and I mean, I can't prove that he doesn't make a walk-in at some other point, but I believe this is the end of Mabel.
Yeah, because he'll wind up in WWE this time next year, and he just spends the rest of his time in Memphis.
I don't think he's back in WWE till the end of 04, because they did. It was when JBL was feuding with The Undertaker, and so he brought in Viscera and Gangrel one week to wrestle The Undertaker on SmackDown, and they both ended up under contract, and then Gangrel was never used again. Much like, do you remember when they signed Henry Godwin to team with Ray Gordy, and then he never got used?
Yeah, and instead we got Luke Gallows as Festus.
Yes.
I guess
So yeah,
because didn't Henry Godwin also get injured during a match again? Like he blew out his leg.
possibly. And anyway, Mabel never wrestles a match in TNA, so he may do another walk-in at some point, but he never has a match. So this could be it.
Yeah.
Anyway, I gave this match a 6.0 out of 10, and it's another of those things you could tell that Russo is booking this because Mabel runs in, does his moves, he looks at the camera for half a second, and we immediately cut away to the next segment, which is the dancers dancing in the cage. Um, so what'd you think about this match?
Really solid match. I had no complaints about it whatsoever. I really liked it. I gave it I after because I rewatched it because originally I had it as a 6. I'll give it a 7.
Mm-hmm. Alrighty. So Eric Watts is not here this week, so he sent in a tape of him hanging out with sports people, with athletes, as some people would call them. He's with Brian Urlacher at one point. Then he's with Mark Rippon and Jim McMahon and John Daly. And basically, they all talk about how much Jeff Jarrett sucks. And, they laugh about how if Jeff Jarrett was a real celebrity, he would be at this celebrity event in Chicago. It's nice when you point out that your world champion is not a real celebrity.
And yet Eric Watts is.
He was a quarterback at the University of Louisville. So,
And won bowl games.
Jeff Jarrett did not play a little football.
I will say this, though. I was thrilled that I saw Jim McMahon and Mark Rippon ass because I played a lot of Tecmo Super Bowl, and I've played as the Eagles with Jim McMahon as the backup QB because I was playing a season with the Eagles and somebody injured Randall Cunningham. So I had to play 4 games as Jim McMahon. It's kind of painful.
Must be, because I imagine this didn't just happen last week. Anywho,
Don Westside time!
Well, actually, before we get there, I want to know, where the hell is this Eric Watts thing going, and do they ever actually acknowledge it? Because I'm going to bet that this is going to be one of those angles that just ends for no reason.
I think we
But
got an idea where it pivots to next week. But I know I know something happens
we'll
between Eric Watts and Jarrett in the future, but not
we'll
now.
discuss it next week. All right. So next week, Jeff Hammond and Hermie Sadler will both be here. Perry Saturn will wrestle Bart Gunn. Sandman and New Jack will wrestle the Harris twins in something called an Armed Asylum match, which just means a weapons match. Now, those are three things that they promoted. I can't imagine anybody wanting to watch the show next week for those three things. However, it's the fourth thing that happened that they announced for next week, or that we already know is going to happen next week, that by itself is worth your $10. Dusty Rhodes is in a fucking ladder match next week. Dusty Rhodes is in a fucking ladder match next week.
It's the ladder match to end all ladder matches.
We should never have had another ladder match after that match because nothing could top that. By the way, remember last week when they announced that there was going to be a big announcement about NASCAR this week? Well, this is the closest thing they had to a big announcement is that Jeff Hammond and Hermie Sadler will be here next week. I want to believe that that was always the plan for the big announcement on this week's show was to announce that next week two NASCAR people will be here. Oh. So then we get Kid Cash versus Jerry Lynn. As we mentioned, Jerry Lynn's been #1 contender since February 12th, but decided to wrestle Conan for the last 2 months instead. I am legitimately shocked that they actually went back to this. And Don West says that there's no way Trinity gets involved in this match since Raven dropped her with a DDT. And to be honest, I was convinced that she would come out because Russo writes this show, so I imagined she was going to come out and get hit with a cradle pile driver or something. But she didn't. Now, apparently these two had an indie show over the weekend that Cash hurt his knee on. Lynn said he would never do anything as low as work over Cash's injured knee over the match. It's okay because Cash mostly ignored it. The referee did not care about Cash breaking the rules. The match was all right, but you expect more with these two involved. Lynn had better matches with half the luchadors that Conan brought in.
Yep.
The finish saw Lynn go for the TKO, but Cash's leg swung into the referee. A different masked man ran out. He ran down and gave Lynn a tornado DDT. Cash crawled over and got the pin. Now, this was a masked person in a spider outfit, so it could have been Moolah coming out as Spider Lady. Do we have proof that Moolah was not doing anything else here in April of 2003?
Aside from being an absolute bitch to women's wrestlers?
Oh, I don't think she was an absolute bitch in 2003. I can't imagine anyone was training under her at this point.
It had to be somebody different because Moolah couldn't do a tornado DDT.
Have you ever seen Moolah do a tornado DDT?
No.
So can you prove that she cannot do a tornado DDT? I mean, she can't now, but could you prove that she couldn't do one in 2003?
She couldn't back then because she'd break her fucking hip.
I don't know. Mae Young took all those crazy ass bumps and didn't get any serious injuries. By the way, it really tells you something that these two can have a disappointing match and it still be 3.5 stars. So
yeah.
7.0 out of 10.
6 out of 10 for me. They went 70% speed than both of them are used to because they had to work around Kid Cash's injury. And by the way, absolutely true about the injury. It was at Gateway Championship Wrestling. It was their 3rd anniversary show. Jerry Lynn won the match by DQ. Kid Cash was seconded by Trinity for this match. And his knee got hyperextended. And this was about 3 days prior to this match. So he was still feeling the ill effects.
Well, it was now time for our world title match. NWA World Heavyweight Champion Jeff Jarrett versus D'Lo Brown. They made sure to point out that Jarrett's had the longest title reign in the TNA era. I mean, other than the fact there have only been 3 title reigns in 10 months, does this really surprise you that Jeff Jarrett has been the longest champion so far?
No, and he's only defended it, what, 4 times?
I wrote 5, but that might be that might be off by 1 or 2. Anywho, Brown attacks Jeff Jarrett backstage, and instead of referees and security forcing them to, go to the ring, they just rang the damn bell. Remember all those Lou Thez world title matches that started as a backstage brawl? I bet that was the only way they got Buddy Rogers to do the job to Thez.
Probably.
Anyway, there are less than 12 minutes of pay-per-view time left when the bell rings, and we get the standard Jeff Jarrett main event world title match. They fight all over the arena. People get involved. The referee ignores the interference. Tenay and West freak out all over this. Main event, Glenn Gilberti gets to the ring early on as Brown beats on Jarrett until he misses a chair shot. Stone Cold Jarrett stomps a mud hole in D'Lo. Glenn technically saved Jarrett's world title by stopping him from using the chair, because even though no one mentions it anymore, a disqualification is a title change in TNA. And I wrote that it really is sad that fans are far more into Jeff Jarrett main events than anything on the undercard, although the undercard was mostly shit this week.
Yep.
They stole the David Young Sonny Siaki spot from earlier tonight where they used each other's finisher to no avail. Then they stole the Kid Cash Jerry Lynn spot by knocking the referee out with a move, but this time Jarrett kicked out. Andrew Thomas, for some reason, stood right behind D'Lo, so when Jarrett went for a cross-body block and D'Lo moved, Jarrett took out the referee. Mike Sanders ran down and laid out Jarrett with the title to no avail. Double clothesline. Raven walks in and sits in the corner for the 3rd time on the show. What the hell is with Raven sitting down in the corner this week? Sanders accidentally kicks Brown. Jarrett hits the stroke and wins the match to retain the title. All I can say is at least we didn't have 30 run-ins on every match on this show, like is the standard Vince Russo modus operandi.
Yep.
So this way, the fact that we only had a shit ton of run-ins in under 3 matches is at least a slight upgrade. But Jeff Jarrett wins 6.5 out of 10.
I gave it a 5 out of 10. It was an average match. And
so mm-hmm.
All right.
After the match,
yeah, go for it.
Raven spins Jarrett around and just stares at him while officials held Jarrett back. Jarrett told the referees and Sex to leave, allowing Jarrett and Raven to just stand mid-ring and stare at each other. Jarrett goes towards Raven when Alexis runs down to the ring and pulls Jarrett back. Jarrett picks up a chair and clonks Alexis with it. The 4th time a man has beaten up a woman tonight. And he does it as the show goes off the air. It's like Russo saw it got good heat 2 weeks ago when Siaki gave Athena the Siacalypse Now. So he decided that since it worked once, it would work 4 times on one show. And here's the thing about that. When you do something 4 times on one show, it means nothing. And this meant even less than nothing, because not only, like I said, was it the 4th time on the show, but the show literally went off the air 2 seconds after it happened. There was no time for Tenay and West to freak out like, oh my God, what happened? Oh my God, I can't believe he did this. Oh my God, whatever. No, he hit her with the chair. 1,000, 1,000, copyright 2003.
Yep, it's exactly how it happened. So on the 39th TNA pay-per-view, my true love gave to me 4 women attacks, 3 by the Faces, 2 by Jeff Jarrett, and an even flow on Trinity.
Aha.
Can I do my show grades first before you this time around?
Of course.
Show grade for me, 4 out of 10, I guess. There is some good stuff on here. Like Kid Cash versus Jerry Lynn, I thought was good. Elix Skipper versus Ron Killings was a really good match. I could take or leave everything else. The violence gets win was really awful for this. So 4 out of 10. Now the interest in next week's show. Guess what my interest in next week's show is?
10,
Now,
of course.
right, but I'm using your previously stipulated interest grade because of main event storyline. 2 out of 10. Because most of the interest, which they talked about on this show, is for April 30th, which is when Raven gets his title match.
Well,
But to be honest, it is 10 out of 10 because Dusty Rhodes is in a ladder match.
so average match quality in this show was a 4.79. Overall enjoyment, 4.5, which really tells you that the second hour came through to some degree because the first hour was shit. However, if the show had just ended with the Raven Jarrett pull apart, then I'd call it a win. But of course, it's a Vince Russo book show, so we cannot have that. And then future build 2.0 out of 10. Next week, more weapons matches, and the 2-week build to something NASCAR related is not something anyone gives a shit about.
Nope.
Literally, the only thing that keeps this above a 0 is the perverse desire to see Dusty Rhodes in a ladder match, giving us an overall rating of 3.76. These shows have to get better at some point, right?
I'm
All right.
just waiting for I'm just waiting for Russo to come back.
Well,
These
we
shows
have
were
to
much
go
fun
re-rack.
to bash when he was around.
Well, we have to go re-rack the tapes and call it a day, and come back in 5 minutes to do next week's show, which is just going to be wonderful, I'm sure. But thank you to everyone for listening. Hope you all enjoyed the show, and we'll talk to you again in 7 days.
Bye bye.